Hello everyone, the summer version of Bucs Talk is once again up and running at bucshockey.com. I'm Scott Montesano, once again welcoming you and thanking you for taking time to pull us up on the internet this week. Everyone isn't necessarily pulling out the winter park anytime soon, and those hats with the thick floppy parts over your ears, those are also staying in the closets for a while, but nonetheless, the breeze of cooler air the past couple of days definitely letting us know that the season is getting closer. It's like the old train whistle. You can kind of hear the train coming around the bend. You just can't see that train quite yet. But the hockey season is drawing ever so closer, as we're now within 2 months of the season. We're now within a month of the exhibition season getting underway as well. Another 30-minute program packed with more Buccaneer appetizers to pass you over until the start of the season. We have some Buccaneer ties with USA Hockey to discuss, and we'll also pull back the curtain just a bit to give you a quick glimpse at the makings of the promotional schedule. Then at the end of the program, we'll debut a pair of new montages we have. Now, what we'll use these montages for, I have no idea, but with 3 hours to kill on a lonely Saturday and some new software on my computer just blinking at me to use, I just had to throw something together. Everybody nowadays can be their own movie producer, thanks to the beauty of computers and the internet and all of that. We'll give you a quick glimpse into my creative abilities coming up in about 25 minutes from now. But we'll start off by talking about the first time you're going to get to see the Buccaneers, their 2011-2012 version, if you will. The Buccaneers this week announcing their preseason schedule. Now, as is the case with all preseason schedules, this is very fluid. It could change. It's not likely to change, but it could change as we draw closer. Once again, Red Simon has put together an aggressive schedule for the preseason. He's going to bring in some guys and use these games as another tryout. Just like last season. You may remember last season, the games have sort of a tryout, knockout sort of a nature to them. Guys will have a chance to play their way onto the team or play their way off of the team by how they act in game situations. The Buccaneers are one of the last teams in the league to open up their full training camp, which will be on September 12th, and by the end of the week, will already be in games. And we'll talk to Red Simon about that once we get into the season and some of the disadvantages and the advantages to doing that. But you may remember last season, the Buccaneers did the exact same thing. 6 games in 8 days, not a lot of practices leading up to it. And what you tend to have is your special teams sometimes suffer because you haven't had a chance to really implement those. Sometimes some of the roles of guys on teams haven't fully developed once you begin the season. But the advantage to beginning as late as the Buccaneers are and then having the aggressive schedule, because some teams are opening up camp as early as this weekend and a lot before the end of the month. This is a long season, and I know fans don't really want to hear about it. It's a long season, blah, blah, blah. The kids are playing a game. Well, it is, though. Even no matter, take something you love to do. Take something you love to do. Maybe it's going out and golfing every weekend, or it's bowling every single week, or it's doing something like that. Maybe it's watching a certain TV show every single week. And no matter how much you love something, if you get too much of it, you want time apart. Heck, the best relationships out there, the best husband-wife relationships involve a couple maybe spending a little time apart. It could be as simple as spending an afternoon apart from one another. But you don't want to constantly be in the presence of the other person. It does drag on you. So that's the kind of the idea here. Why would you start so early? The season's going to go all the way through April, and the Buccaneers have visions this year of it going into May. So let's let the guys stay home a couple extra weeks, if you will. Now, for the guys who are in high school, the high school-aged players, they're coming into town next week as classes at Valley High School begin on August 22nd. But for the team as a whole, it's not for another few weeks. But getting back to the preseason schedule, and if you want the full schedule, well, you found this show on the internet, so you definitely have the ability to find things on the World Wide Web. It's located on the website, bucshockey.com. But 6 games in 8 days, and it's a little different from last year. It's going to include a couple more home playoff games. So it's going to be a game in Waterloo on Friday the 17th, home for a Sunday matinee against Sioux Falls on the 18th. Then on the 20th, a Tuesday, home again against Waterloo before playing in the USHL Fall Classic in Sioux City on Wednesday afternoon, on Thursday afternoon, and Friday morning. 6 games in 8 days. It's a pace not equaled at all during the regular season, but something that the Buccaneers did last season, and it's done on purpose, not out of necessity. Some people say, is this the only time the Buccaneers could get their games scheduled? Well, the Buccaneers are not Morgan State in Division I basketball, just taking any old game they can get from a big-time team. This was done on purpose, and Reg himself mentioned that in an interview we had on the website last week. It's done on purpose to weed the players out. That's what it's done. He wants to see the players in game situations. How do they react to game situations? What do they bring to the table in a game situation where the pace is a little quicker, the pace is faster? And some people will say it's a preseason game. How can you tell totally what a guy is going to bring to the table in preseason games? Well, for the exact same reason that we were talking about here. Players are looking to play their way out of the team. You see a lot of competitive games in the preseason. A lot of you longtime fans know that. You see competitive games. You may even see an extra fight in a preseason game. There is an intensity in preseason games. I'm not going to sit here and over-glamorize it, but there is an intensity to the preseason games because players are playing for their position. They're playing for a spot on the team. There's no contracts involved. Players aren't necessarily locked into being with the Buccaneers, and they know that coming in. There's nothing that guarantees any single player coming here that they're going to be on the team. So they want to make sure they don't give the coaching staff any reason to send them home when they show up here. And that's the same for Des Moines, Waterloo, Fargo, Green Bay. So you see a bit of an intensity, and Reg wants to see these players play in these game situations. He also wants to test physical and mental toughness. The Buccaneers will have a lot of healthy scratches in these preseason games. It's very unlikely that any one player is going to play in all 6 of the preseason games. But players will probably see action in 4, maybe 5, probably 3 of the preseason games. And still, a lot of games in a short window. The coaching staff wants to see what these guys can bring to the table. Also, at the same time, which remember the importance of the Fall Classic games, for a lot of players, especially newbies coming into the league, it's a big opportunity for them to make a good first impression on some college scouts. A lot of college scouts have not seen these players until the Fall Classic. They may have heard of them, but they haven't been watching them as of yet. And the Fall Classic is a good opportunity to get on the radar. Looking again at the preseason schedule, and once again, just go to bucshockey.com for that. Buccaneers announcing their preseason schedule earlier this week. Remember, the regular season opener is at home on Saturday, October the 1st, against the Fargo Force. Buccaneers will go into that having played 6 games in 8 days in their preseason. I know many fans like to go up to the USHL Fall Classic in Sioux City, and Des Moines has the exact same schedule they had last season at the Fall Classic, right down to opening up with Sioux Falls at the Tyson Event Center on the opening day of the Classic on that Wednesday. It's a little disappointing that the Buccaneers once again only get 1 game at the Showplace Arena. If you haven't been up to the Fall Classic, or even if you remember the Buck Bowl when it was held here, it spans 2 different facilities. You have the Tyson Event Center, a building less than a decade old. It's the home of the Sioux City Musketeers. It's where pretty much all the scouts go to for every single game. They've got a free meal for the scouts. They take care of the scouts there. Then they have a secondary facility, which is on the southern end of the city, which is adjacent to their minor league baseball stadium. And at that, and you have a lot of games going on there. And you do get the scouts who come down. The scouts do go back and forth. They do go back and forth. But there's no mistaking the feeling. It's not official, but there's no mistaking the feeling that the games that are at the Tyson Event Center are viewed as more of a showplace game than the ones that are played at the other facility. Think of it this way. For those of you familiar with tennis, think of the Tyson Event Center as center court at Wimbledon or center court at the U.S. Open, and the other facility where the Buccaneers will play 2 of their games this season, as has been the case the last couple of years. The other facility, think of that as the grandstand stadium on the tennis grounds. At the U.S. Open, they've got that. At the U.S. Open, they've got that. At Wimbledon, they've got that. They've got center court. Then they've got the secondary one that's right next to it. That's still viewed as very important, but it's not as grand. Well, it's a little disappointing, more from an ego standpoint, that the Buccaneers are only getting that one game at the Tyson Event Center. You wish they were getting a couple more, but what are you going to do? If the Buccaneers want more games at the Tyson Event Center, there's really nothing. The Buccaneers will be up there enough when they're taking on the Sioux City Musketeers. And there is something that should be pointed out. It has no bearing on players getting looked at by colleges. It's just more of a convenience factor. You much rather play, and you'd much rather watch games at the Tyson Event Center. The good part of it, though, and I think the Buccaneers would take this any day of the week over playing more games at the Tyson Event Center, and that is the fact that they play the first game on Friday and will get out of town by about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That will allow the players and the team to be back at their own host families, be back in the city by 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and they'll have Friday night to themselves. And over the weekend, the Buccaneers will be making their final selections, their final roster moves in preparation for the season. But it gives the guys a chance to, after 6 games in 8 days, to maybe go out to a movie on Friday night, to just relax on a Friday night, and do not underestimate how valuable a Friday night is to these players once the season gets going. It's valuable. It's a valuable time, and that's something that should not be overlooked. So the Buccaneers will definitely take the schedule that they've got for the preseason. One thing a lot of people are asking me about as we continue on with Bucs Talk for this week is, can you give us a little taste of the roster? What do you know? What do you know about the roster? Do you have any sneak peeks? Scott, you know you can trust me. And I'll be honest with you, folks, the roster is under lock and key. They simply do not trust me. They don't trust me, and you know what? I don't know if I blame them. Giving me the roster, it would be like giving a monkey a hand grenade and placing that monkey in the middle of a small building. They don't give me the roster because they know I would tell you the roster, and right now we don't want to release the roster. Now, that doesn't mean that the Buccaneers are never going to release the roster. If you want to know what the roster is, hey, we're going to have it for the first game, the first exhibition game that the Buccaneers have at home on Sunday, September the 18th. So we'll have the roster, the training camp roster at that point. You can also, if you want, Reg Simon has given me the go-ahead to say this, we will have our training camp practices open to the public. Anybody and anyone can come and watch training camp practices. You just come to the arena, and you can watch the training camp practices from the lounge area. That's the only thing the coaching staff asks, is that practices be watched from the lounge area. And quite frankly, you probably would rather watch it from the lounge anyway. We'll put some TVs on for you there, and obviously it's a heated portion of the building. But if you want to come and find out for yourself who some of these guys are, you can come to the training camp practices. And once again, training camp itself will get going in earnest on September 12th. But once again, we don't have a roster to go over with you, and we're not going to have a roster